Hello, this is Zach, and I'm going to be making a video about creating and working with files using RPGLE. And to do this, I pulled an example from a textbook, the Programming in ILE RPG 5th edition. In the third chapter, I just paraphrased some of the examples from the end of that chapter. And so the first one's a scenario where a library wants a database file for storing book titles, author's last name, first name, middle initial, catalog number, a date published, and a number of pages. So the first thing we're going to do is create a physical file definition to store this data, and then we're going to consider if we want to make a keyed field, and we're going to also consider if we want to use the unique keyword and if that's going to be appropriate. And then after that, we're going to use SQL to create a table with the same fields as that physical file. So the first thing we want to do is I'm going to do work member PDM, and we want to make sure that, so I'm going to be creating a physical file. So I want to make sure that we're in our DDS source file of our library. And I'm going to use F6 to create the member. And the name of it is just going to be, I'm just going to say libpf for library physical file. And then I'm going to use pf for the source type. We can also press F4 to prompt this, and we can see a list of all the different source types. So like we have our physical file here, and later we're going to be using a logical file, which is there. Pressing F12 to go back, and then I'll just describe this by saying library um, physical file, and then hitting enter. So now we can start writing our DDS file, our physical file. So now we put A's in this column here, and then we can use F4 to prompt in SEU. And so in using F1, we can see what types of things we can put in the different positions. So R is going to be for our record type, our record format, and then K is going to be our keyed field names. Um, And so this is going to, so the first line, I'm going to decide if I want to use my unique keyword. And so if I hit F1, we can go down and see the list of keywords that we can put into here. And so if I go down to unique, we can see that unique is used to indicate that duplicate key field values are not allowed. And so I'm going to use that unique keyword to say that I don't want any duplicate records, and it's going to be checking the keyed value to make sure that there's no duplicate values. So that would be something like if we had social security numbers in our records, it would make sure that there's no duplicates of those, and it just makes it so that each record is unique. And so I'm going to just put unique in here, and then I can just press enter, and then we can move on to our record format. And so in here, I've just put the R and the name type, and then we can say that our record format, we can just say library record as our record format. And then once we have that, we can start listing out our fields. And I'll just keep prompting it. And then, so the first one's going to be our book title. And this is going to be, I can just make it something like a length of 20. And then here we're going to specify the data type. So I can hit F1 and see all the different data types. And I want this to be a character data type, so I'm going to use A. So I'm going to put an A here. There's no decimal positions in a character data type, so I can just hit enter and then keep moving on. And now that I have that, I'm just going to use that as my um, baseline for where to type everything else. And so the next one's going to be author's last name. I'm just going to make that 15 length character, and then I'm going to do author's first name, which is going to be the same length. And then I'm going to do the middle name, or the middle initial, which is going to be 1 character long. And then next um, they wanted a catalog number, I think it was. They wanted a catalog number, publisher date, and number of pages. So we'll just do cata num. And this is going to be, so I'll prompt this. So in here we're going to make it, this is going to be a numeric type. And so I'm just going to make this a length of 10. And then if we prompt this, or use F1, we can see that S is the zoned decimal data. So we're going to use S to say this is zoned S. And then we're going to indicate that there's no decimal points. And so we move on to the next part, which was the publisher's date. So the date is going to be a different type. So I'll prompt it, and we can see that if we press F1, it's in a weird spot, but this L indicates date data. So if we put an L in this position and hit enter, that's going to be a date field. And then after that was just a page number of pages. So something like that. And this can be 5 digits long of a zoned with 0 decimals. So after we do that, we can specify a keyed field. So if I prompt this, and here we can say, we can use a K to specify a keyed field name. And out of all of the fields here, one of them kind of stands out as the best to use for a keyed, which would be the catalog number, because that can be unique. Whereas like the last name isn't necessarily always going to be a unique field. People could have the same last name, but we could make sure that each book has its own category number or catalog number. So if I prompt this again, we can put K in here, and then we'll write cata num, which was that, and then we just specified this as our keyed field. So now that is done, and we can write file to save this, and then making sure we have our library list set up with our library that we want, we can compile this with 14, and we see that the file was created in our library that we have specified. And so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a SQL statement to create a table with the same fields. So what a good idea to do is to like take a screenshot to make sure we have the same, um, we use the same fields. I have a screenshot on my other screen here though. So to write SQL, we can do start SQL, and we can get into here, and I'm just going to page down so that we have a fresh sheet here. And so we want to start with saying create table. And so this is a data description specification, and this is going to be used to define database objects. So this is how we create a table. We just start off by saying create table, and then we name our table here, and I'll just name it library. I'll just make it library table, something like that. And then the next line, we're going to start specifying our fields. So the first one was book title, and this was a character of 20. And so we specify the type of it here, and then we say that it's a length of 20. And then we start doing other ones. So author last name was also a character of length 15. And so I'm just going to copy this because our next one is very similar, because it's just the first name. So I can kind of speed this up by doing that. And then this was middle initial, and it had a length of 1. And then we had our catalog number, and this was a numeric. So this is how we specify a numeric value, and it was 10 spaces. And then this was also our primary key, so we specify that by saying primary key. And then our next line is going to be our date value, so pub date, and then we specify that by just saying date, and then we're not specifying any kind of date format, so we're just going to leave it like that. And then lastly, we had our page numbers, so page num, and this was another numeric of 5. And then we end this by ending our parentheses. And then we can also specify a record format here, but that's optional, so I'm not going to do it. And so once we have all this typed in, we make sure that everything has what it's supposed to have, we can hit enter and see that the table was created but not journaled. And so we created this table in our library. So to just test that, I can say select all from the table that we just created. And if I hit enter, we can see that we have our table here with no data in it. And if I hit Shift F8, we can scroll over to and F7 to go back and forth. We can scroll to see our different fields that we made. There's nothing in here, so it just says end of data. But if we did fill this table with data, we would see it in here. So F3 to leave. And so that was the first part, using F3 and enter to go back. So now our next part is going to be, we're going to make a logical file. And so a physical file that we just created is basically used to store the data. And this logical file is just going to determine how data records are selected and defined when we read when read by an application program. So the main difference really between a logical file and a physical file is that logical files don't actually contain any data. Data is only going to be contained in our physical file. So instead of storing data, they store access paths or pointers to the records in the physical file. So our logical files are always going to be based on one or more physical file. So yeah, we're going to make a logical file, and then we're also going to use SQL to create an index that enables the type of access that we want. And that type of access that we want, I haven't even read this part. The library wants to access catalog info based on our author's last name, first name, and middle initial. So what we want to do is go into here, and we're going to create a physical file that is going to be very similar to our we're going to create a logical file, and it's going to be really similar to the physical file. So we're going to say library LF is the name, and then I'll specify this as LF, and then I'll say library um, logical file. So our first line, we are going to specify the record format, which is going to be the same that we used in our physical file, which was library record, if I remember correctly. And then we also are going to use a keyword here. If we press F1, we want to specify our physical file. So using pfile, we specify the physical file used by logical file. So we want to say here that our pfile is the library physical file that we just created. So we're basing our logical file off this physical file. Now we can write our key fields. So in this position, so I guess I can prompt this. So in our name type, we can either put the record R for record format or K for our keyed field. And so that's what we're going to be doing here. And we also have some other options, but this is the one that we are focusing on. And so our first one is keyed field is going to be author last name. And then I'm just going to quickly try to type this. And the next one's going to be author's first name. And then the last one is author's middle initial. So this is saying that our records are going to be sorted first by author's last name, then by author's first name, and then by middle initial. So this is the way that our records are going to be read from our file. So it's going to be looking at these keyed values. Once we have that, we can hit File to save, and then I'm also going to use 14 to compile. And we see that the file was created in our library. So that was that one done, and we can finish off by making this index. So what we want to do is similar to what we did before, start SQL. We want to create our index. And so our index is going to be a database object, and the purpose is going to be to improve our performance of SQL statements. So an index is going to be implemented as a keyed logical file. Similar to a logical file, it also doesn't contain any data. So what that's going to look like is we say create index. I'll do it all capital. Index, and then we're going to name this. So I'm just going to say library index, and then we're going to say on, and we're going to specify our physical file. So this is going to be libpf, and then we specify our keyed fields, which was the author's last name, and then the author's first name, and then the author's middle initial. So that's all we're going to need to specify that. And then once we hit enter, we say that our index was created on the table libpf. And so that's really all that is asking us to do here. I'm going to make another video of it filling these tables with actual data, and then we're going to create a program to read all these. But another thing that I want to show, oops, another thing that I want to show is that if we do the work object command, you can prompt that with F4, and I'm just going to say I want to look at all of the objects in the library that I'm using. And so we can see all of these files that we just created. So we see our index here. It's attributed as a logical file. We see our other logical file that we created, and we see our physical file and the table that we created stored as a physical file. So this is where all of our objects are, which is our compiled members. So we have our list of members in here, which work with members using PDM. We got here using work member PDM, and then if we work objects, these are going to be different. These are two different things. So it's an important concept to understand that if you deleted this object here, we would still have our members in our work member PDM. So here is our list of objects, which is our compiled members, and then in here we have our members. So that's going to be all the information in this video, and I'm going to do a follow-up filling these with actual data.